Welcome to Studies with Stearman. Join us as we look deeper into the Bible. Strengthen your faith with us, even as we see the day approaching. And now, here's Gary.
Been talking about the tribulation, been looking at Revelation, particularly Revelation chapters 6 and 7. And it is kind of appropriate that we're talking about God warning or sending a warning to his people. The Lord is gracious, and if you'll notice in the Old Testament, when the people get out of God's will, God always sends a prophet, or more than one prophet. In many cases, he would send a major prophet and some minor prophets to bring a warning either to the king or to the religious authorities of the day, to say, if you do not shape up, God's judgment's going to fall. And usually the prophets ended up being killed, sadly. And I say usually, I think in every case, except the case of Elijah, who was taken to heaven in a fiery chariot. And that was a good thing for him. If he'd stayed on this earth, he probably would have had a terrible end. But the point is, God sends warnings time and time again. He is sending warnings today, but not in the Old Testament way. His word, the New Testament, is a prophecy. It is like the books, the 27 books of the New Testament are like a prophet speaking to us. We don't need a physical prophet. All we need to do is read the word, and we are duly warned about what's to come. When we get to the book of Revelation, the warning has gotten very deep and very dark indeed. And speaking of those Old Testament prophets, the very last words of the Old Testament are these: "For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts. It shall leave them neither root nor branch." That is a pretty dark prophecy. Malachi 4:2, "But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall." So Jesus here is depicted as the rising sun. It's kind of fascinating that the symbol of the rising sun was used by the Old Testament priests. If you look carefully at the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are places where you see in the margin in ink the Hebrew symbol for the rising sun as a messianic symbol. Now, that later grew into an apostasy because the priests of Jesus' day actually worshiped the sun, which, by the way, is not in the law of Moses. But they got the idea that the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N, was God's metaphor for the rising sun of the day of the Lord. Malachi 4:3, "You shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I shall do this." So God's not only going to destroy the wicked, but he's going to destroy the wicked invader. Remember, he says, "Remember ye the law of Moses my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb for all Israel, with statutes and judgments. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, the heart of the children to the fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse." So it is that action of Elijah, I believe, that is the groundbreaking action that results in what we studied the last couple of weeks. Revelation chapter 7, the 144,000 Jews, I think, are prepared for the activities that they take by the presence of Elijah the prophet. The reason I mention the fact that in the old days, in the Old Testament, prophets were sent to the people. In the New Testament days, we already have the prophecy, which is the New Testament, but in the days that follow the church age, God's going to send a prophet again, just like he did in the old days. He's going to send a prophet to the Jews. It'll be Elijah. And Elijah will, I'm sure, have very special words for the 144,000, which will prepare them for the work they have to do. Elijah would be very, very familiar with the work of Christ. And that's very obvious from the Gospels, because if you recall, when Peter, James, and John went to the top of that mountain and saw Christ transfigured, they also saw Moses and Elijah. This tells us that Moses and Elijah at the time of Christ were, if you will, clued in to what Jesus was doing. They were already a party to the fact that the Son of God had been incarnated about 33 years earlier, and that he was now in the era of his public ministry. He had brought Peter, James, and John up to the mountaintop so that they would experience the coming of the kingdom and understand how this was all going to happen. So they really understood. I'm saying they, Moses and Elijah, understood that the Lord God incarnated himself in order to give himself as a blood sacrifice and atonement for the sins of the nations. And so that's what's happening here in Revelation 7. The 144,000 go out, they become great evangelists, and we find this great multitude described as a multitude of nations, kindreds, people, and tongues. Nobody's excluded from that. And they are going to be experiencing the horrors, not of the great and terrible day of the Lord at this point. In other words, the tribulation will just be in its warm-up stages. But it'll be bad. The moon and the sun and the stars are somehow going to be affected. The light of them is going to be interrupted. There will be earthquakes. I'm not sure there's a scale high enough to record the earthquakes that are going to happen during the tribulation. We talk about an MMI of 7 and above on the earthquake scale. It's just about as bad as it gets these days. But if you went up to an 8, a 9, or a 10 on the MMI scale, and I've done some reading on this, you begin to get to the point where the underpinnings of the plates that hold the continents start turning to liquid, almost like some kind of a gel. If you went above an 8 or a 9 or a 10 earthquake, things start to slide around. Well, that's exactly what we have here. We have every mountain and island, Revelation 6:14, moved out of their places, slipping and sliding, exactly as predicted by those people who study earthquakes. So we know that the earthquakes are going to be just horrendous compared to what we experience today. People are going to want to be saved. Save me, O Lord. You start seeing this, or by that time, I'm not sure that there will be much of an electrical power grid left. There might be satellite televisions here and there, so people are getting the news about what's happening. But they will know that Judgment Day has arrived, and they're going to be crying out for salvation. Somebody knocks on the door. I bring you the good news of the Lord Jesus Christ. They're going to fall down and kiss that person's feet. That's the situation that we're seeing here in Revelation 7, which then sort of paints a picture of the first half of the tribulation. Revelation 8 talks about the seventh seal. Now, we've opened 6 seals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and not until the 6th one did we get to the wrath of the Lamb. The first 5 were essentially an initial warm-up, if you will, a setting of the stage for the great and terrible day of the Lord. The 6th one has the people hiding underground and crying out, "Save us from the wrath of the Lamb." Now, how they know enough to cry out for salvation from the wrath of the Lamb, beyond me. Somehow they have discovered that God is on the warpath. We don't know exactly how they've discovered that. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? We have then this incredible salvation picture made real by disasters that we see happening around us today, in which people are really, really hungry for stability. They're hungry for some kind of assurance. I see it on the news. I see the talking heads, ABC, CBS, NBC, and all those others. The talking heads are saying, in effect, what's going on here? The experts don't really seem to have a handle on this. There's a little bit of consternation, even among those who don't believe. That's a bad thing, but it's also a good thing, because every now and then we need to be reminded of who's in control. It is not the global warming professorial community that's in control. Although we've had a tendency up to now to trust the academics. You want to know what's happening in the weather, you talk to a PhD in meteorology, and he'll tell you what's happening in the weather. You want to talk about earthquakes, you want to learn everything there is to know about earthquakes, you talk to a seismologist. You guys got 2 PhDs, one from Stanford and one from MIT, and this guy can tell you all about earthquakes. But no, there comes a day when those guys don't know a thing, and that day is coming. So having prefaced everything that we've looked at so far by a little look at our present-day society, we come to chapter 8 and the opening of the 7th seal. Now, there's a lot of mythology about the 7th seal. There have been movies made. There was a movie made called The 7th Seal that was a farce, if you will. It was a secular guy's idea of some kind of an ancient mystical curse that had to be broken by the proper sacrifice and so forth and so on. And I'm sure it did fairly well at the box office because it used that phrase, the 7th seal, which everybody's heard about. But in the mind of the world, if you just utter those 3 words, the 7th seal, people will think of some kind of an occultic, esoteric, mystical, kind of a magical thing. But that's not what it is at all. It's Jesus opening the scroll, the divine indictment against the nations. And the first 6 seals comprise a warning. The 7th seal begins the actual judgment. And when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. If you recall, when we looked at the 144,000, the 144,000 were prefaced by 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, so that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. So there was a cessation of the natural patterns of meteorology, somehow. I think that this is a moment of worship. Essentially what it's doing is honoring the glory of God, who is about to do a new and a strange work. If you remember, Isaiah referred to the tribulation as Jehovah's strange act, meaning that Jehovah does not naturally like to do these things. He's a loving God. Jehovah, the judge of the earth, ultimately does not like to be the judge of the earth. He's only the judge when humanity forces him to be the judge. Virtually all the Old Testament prophets refer to the fact that Jehovah doesn't want to do this, but when he must do it out of love, before he does it, there's this moment of silence in heaven. And what do you think of when you think of silence in heaven? It's pretty simple, really. What if I just quit right now and said, okay, we're going to have 5 minutes of silence. I want you all to bow your heads. We're just not going to do anything for 5 minutes. What would you be doing for that 5 minutes, personally and privately? I think you'd be praying, committing yourself to the will of God, personally. You'd be saying, what in the world is Gary doing? Why did he call for 5 minutes of silence? Whenever you call for silence, it is an acknowledgement that God is present. God is not silent. He is not inactive. He is a living, vital presence. And that's exactly what's going on here. He's being acknowledged. So, when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels, which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. And these trumpets are not called shofars, by the way. It's very interesting. The Bible uses specific language concerning trumpets. In both Hebrew and Greek, it has a name for the shofar or the ram's horn, and it also has a name for a brass trumpet or a metal trumpet. One is called shofar, the other one's called salpingi. So the salpingo is blown here. And what it says here is that these angels were given 7 metal trumpets of some kind. I don't know what they are, but what do you think of when you think of trumpets? Alarm. Do you think of, well, I'll tell you what I think of. Big black cloud in the west. And what happens? Your neighborhood trumpet begins to blow. And some of them actually look like trumpets. They go round and round and round, And you hear the trumpet, and what are you thinking? Uh-oh, it's time for shelter. Well, that's exactly the way the Bible blows trumpets. These trumpets are trumpets saying the storm is on the horizon. 7 trumpets. By the way, in the Old Testament, in the book of Joel, and Joel is given a particular vision. If you want to turn with me to Joel for a moment, it's Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah. Daniel, Hosea, Joel. In chapter 2, you have Joel talking about exactly the same thing that we're reading about in Revelation. Joel was given a vision of the day of the Lord. And in Joel chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm in my holy mountain, let all the inhabitants of the land tremble. For the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand." Now, notice the day of the Lord is not there yet. This is before the day of the Lord. It's near. It is coming. Day of darkness, gloominess, clouds, thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong. There hath not ever been the like, neither shall there be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. So we're going to look at Joel again several times during this, because the vision of Joel and the vision witnessed by John have to be interpreted together. They provide 2 different perspectives of the same vision. Joel 2:15, "Blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly. Gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children, and those that suck the breasts, let the bridegroom go forth out of his chamber, and the bride out of his closet." If you turn to Joel 2:31, again, "The sun shall be turned to darkness, the moon to blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come." This is a warning. Before the tribulation, there are going to be natural upheavals, and they are given as warnings to the people then alive. We may be on the very verge of this happening. I can't say that for sure. I do not name dates. But I see the world systems becoming destabilized. And I do believe that God is preparing for judgment. I can't say what God's plan is. I honestly can't. I'm just watching like everybody else. I can't predict. It sure looks like something is being set up. I don't know. I pray that God will extend His grace. If I could have a prayer answered, it would be, God, put godly men in government over us. Restore our economy. Let us be a light unto the nations once more. Stave off the great collapse. That would be my prayer. But I suspect that's not exactly what's going to happen. I suspect the time for judgment is near. I don't know. Who am I? I'm just somebody watching, as we all are. And it is good to watch, even if you're perplexed. Why? Because in the process, you honor God. You put Him way up here and you put yourself way down here. And you've got to keep that divine perspective. Joel 3:13 talks about, then, the beginning of the judgment. "Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe." Jesus, when He came and spoke to the disciples, always used the metaphor of harvest for the end of the age. The end of the age is likened to harvest. There is a great harvest of souls. Those souls being harvested, by the way, we saw in Revelation chapter 7, where multitudes are saved all over the world because of God's grace. God graciously unveils His wrath, or a preview of it, and it scares people to the point that you might have witnessed to these people a dozen times and they told you to hit the road. But let me tell you, when the warning day comes and you go to them with the gospel one more time, they'll say, praise the Lord, hallelujah. You bet I'm going to receive Christ. And that's what's going on. Multitudes, it says here in verse 14 of Joel 3, multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The day of the Lord hasn't quite come yet, but it's coming. Why is this called the valley of decision? Well, two reasons. We saw one in Revelation. We saw this troop of evangelists released to go all over the world and to tell people that judgment is coming. And to those who do not hear and do not receive them, judgment will come. If they make the wrong decision, it will turn into judgment. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and the moon shall be darkened, the stars shall withdraw their shining. What would make the sun and the moon be darkened? Nuclear winter, an international exchange of nuclear weapons could cloud the stratosphere. Volcanism, if you have a lot of volcanoes going off all at the same time, you could block out the sun and the moon. Maybe a solar terrestrial cataclysm of some sort, CME, coronal magnetic ejection, storm on the sun, who knows? But all this is going to happen, and it will scare people half to death. And that's the purpose of it, from my perspective. Let's face it, a loving God would do that. He would kind of scare his children. Are you scared yet? Come on, shape up. That's the way he works. So, back to Revelation chapter 8. When he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half hour. The prelude here. These trumpet judgments are a warning to the earth that the tribulation judgments are just about to start. Nature is in convulsion. And we have then, in verse 6, the angels preparing to sound. Verse 2, I saw the seven angels which stood before God. To them were given seven trumpets. Another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer. And there was given to him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was upon the throne. There's a temple in heaven that is the original temple. The original temple, after which the earthly tabernacle and temples were copied. The real thing is in heaven. And if you recall, there is an altar of incense outside of the Holy of Holies. And the purpose of that is so that when the high priest goes in, he symbolically, in the case of Israel, would carry with him the prayers of the saints, and he would have a bowl of what was called Ketoret HaKadosh, the Holy Ketoret, which is a sacramental, sacred incense. By the way, the recipe has been lost, but they've almost rediscovered it again. They are beginning to remanufacture it, about 99% pure Ketoret, preparing for temple sacrifices. And the purpose of this holy incense is to fling this powder on a glowing bed of charcoal, and big clouds of smoke will rise up, and they will take the prayers of the saints directly to God. This is what we see happening here. There was given to him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints on the golden altar which was before the throne. So the whole tribulation period is bathed in prayer. Absolutely bathed in prayer. God values prayer, and I have to confess, it's something I have wrestled with in my own life, because if you're like me, occasionally we'll pray, but we don't feel like our prayer is going anywhere. I don't know whether you've ever had that experience, but sometimes you will pray and you just have the feeling like, well, I'm just talking to myself. I don't think God's hearing me. Well, he is, in spite of your feeling. He is. And not only that, but somehow your prayer becomes interlocked with prayers of millions of other people, and it is presented before the Lord. That's what the Lord's doing today, by the way. He's functioning as high priest. The high priest carries the prayers of the saints and presents them to the Father. If you understand how that works, you're going to have to tell me, because I don't understand. That's way beyond me. But it's what the Bible describes. It's described here during the tribulation period after the rapture of the church. The tribulation saints are praying. And those prayers are presented at the golden altar of incense. Verse 4, and the smoke of the incense, which came with the prayers of the saints, ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. Wouldn't you like to see that? How does that work? I just have to see that someday. To be there and to see these things would just have to be unbelievably wonderful. The angel took the censer. That's kind of fascinating. We think of a censer, like you've seen those burning incense censers that they use in formal churches. Usually it's a brass ball filled with incense on a chain, and they fling it around and around, and it smokes like crazy and fills the church with incense. We of the evangelical fundamental strain of Christianity don't stand on such ceremonies, and we kind of think, we don't need to fling a censer with incense. We go directly before the Lord. But on the other hand, the angels do it. This angel's got an actual censer. He goes to the altar and he fills it with fire. And he casts it into the earth. There were voices, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. And there it goes, right there. Somehow, this prayer ceremony results in the initial blast of the tribulation period. And I think it's fascinating to keep in mind, or to keep it in perspective, that the whole tribulation is bathed in the prayer of the saints. It's a very solemn time. It's a time when great horrors will be happening. It's also a time of salvation, and it's a time of God's righteous judgment. So what happens with the sound of the first trumpet? About a third of the earth's dry surface is destroyed. And we're going to look at that later. We're going to look at how all these judgments are laid out and how they fit together, the trumpet judgments and the vial judgments. And why we even need to know. I mean, why do we even need to see these judgments laid out? Well, there's a reason for it. There's a reason why this is given. The first trumpet, verse 6, 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. And everywhere you see the word sounded in the King James, prepared themselves to sound. In the verse 7, the first angel sounded. The Greek word there is trumpeted, salpinge. The verb means to hold the trumpet up to your mouth and blow the trumpet, salpinge. The first angel sounded, there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. And they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Bad. Third part of the trees, and all green grass. Now, what would happen to the earth if you burned up all the green grass? Have you ever been through a prairie fire? And I have, in northern Oklahoma. And after that thing goes through, it looks like the end of the world when all the green stuff is burned up. But more importantly, what's happening here is that the systems that provide sustenance for human life are being removed, one at a time. If you remove the green grass, you change the climate. You cannot grow ordinary crops. The hydrological cycle is changed. When you begin to remove green growing things that sublime moisture into the air and cause the hydrological cycle, you begin to change all the weather patterns on the earth. And there has got to be heat and drought and misery and smoke and people looking around for shelter and for food and not finding any. And this is only the initial blast. This is just the beginning. This is not even the worst part by far. And I suspect that at this time, because we're still in the first half of the tribulation, I suspect that during this, the 144,000 evangelists are still doing their work around the world. And with each blast of the trumpet, the motivation to receive Christ becomes stronger and stronger as things get tougher and tougher. You might say, oh, things are going to get better, but then when this happens, and then when the next thing happens, and the next thing happens, you're going to be, where was that guy again? I want to talk to him. Has anybody seen the guy who was here the other day talking about Jesus? Time for me to have a conversation with that guy, because it doesn't look like it's going to get any better. The second trumpet sounds. The second trumpet destroys 1/3 of the salt water, including sea life. The second angel sounds, as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea. 1/3 part of the sea became blood. 1/3 part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and 1/3 part of the ships were destroyed. Now, to me, this looks like an asteroid or a large meteorite plunging into the sea. Is this a natural meteorite? Is it out there right now in orbit somewhere, just waiting for its appointment with the ocean? It could be. God could have put a meteorite in orbit 20,000 years ago, and it's just been out there circulating around and around, and God figured in advance the exact moment when it would hit just exactly which part of the world. It could be out there right now. Have you noticed the interest in what are called Earth-grazing asteroids, by the way? There have been a lot of articles written. NASA now has a telescope network that takes pictures 24 hours a day around the world, and particularly at twilight when an Earth-grazing asteroid will show up on the cameras. Wide-angle lenses pointed up to detect the orbits of Earth-grazing asteroids. Why? Because we need to know in advance when one of those things is going to hit the Earth. Why? So we can send up a spaceship and blow it up, or divert it. And by the way, there have been several movies made. I can't remember the titles, but there have been several movies made where we send up astronauts to blow up asteroids that are threatening the Earth. So people are scared of this very thing. They're afraid of it right now. And by the way, there's one asteroid called, I think, 31 Tutatis is the name of it. And they say that it could very well hit the Earth in, I believe, the next 27 years or so. And they're watching it very carefully. And every time it comes by the Earth, it goes between the Earth and the Moon. That is, it's closer to the Earth than the Moon is. So it has caught people's attention, and they're saying, one of these days we might have to send something up, maybe a nuclear missile, to blow up that asteroid or to throw it off course. All I'm saying is that the things that are appearing in the Bible are also quite apparent in the observations of the scientists today. They're afraid of it. What about this 1/3 part of the sea becoming blood? A number of tribulation judgments are similar to the 10 plagues that God brought on Egypt. And here is one such similarity. What happened in the first plague? Anybody remember the first of the 10 plagues? When you do the Passover Seder, you fling the little drops of wine on the plate and you call out the 10 plagues. Remember, the number 1 plague is blood. And here we have the plague of blood. The Passover and the institutions of the Passover are a foreshadowing of the Great Tribulation period, so that faithful Jews who follow the types and symbols of the festival calendar will understand what's happening during the tribulation. They will very well understand, and furthermore, they will have Elijah with them at that time, because Elijah's coming before the great and terrible day of the Lord. He'll explain to them what's happening. Elijah is anticipated at every Passover. The little children go to the door and look for Elijah, and they set a place for Elijah. What if one day Elijah actually came in and sat down at Passover Seder and he said, little children, I want you to know that we're very, very close. Some horrible things are going to happen to the earth that resemble the 10 plagues of the Exodus. And I am quite sure that that's going to happen. Elijah is going to tell his people so that they won't be surprised, so that they'll know where to hide. I think the Jews are going to be hidden and protected. In fact, Revelation 12 specifically talks about that. So we have here the second trumpet, turning the sea to blood. How does that happen? I don't know. I don't understand what this blood is. It could be some chemical component of the asteroid striking the surface of the sea that causes the sea to turn blood red. I have no idea. But God knows. A third part of the creatures in the sea which had life died. Third part of the ships were destroyed. That's a big asteroid. Causes a big tidal wave. A global tidal wave, I dare say a tsunami, and if you lived in a coastal area at this time, you would probably suffer grievously. In fact, there's been a movie made about that. Asteroid strikes the Earth, and all the people on the east coast of the United States drown because it caused a tidal wave to come up out of the Atlantic. People are afraid of this stuff. They're making movies about it. They're writing books. And why? Because deep down in the heart of man, there is the knowledge that we live suspended by a thread. And we live through the blessing and the mercy of God. As proud as we are of our systems, of our military, of our space program, of our science, on and on and on. All that is false faith. This is the real thing. The third trumpet. Third trumpet destroys 1/3 of the sweet water on earth. Third angel sounded, there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers, upon the fountains of the waters. Well, the fountains of the waters would be what? Underwater aquifers. Now, I don't know how those are destroyed, but the fountains or well springs of water are described here. So the source of sweet water on earth begins to be contaminated. So first you had hail and fire, trees and grass. Secondly, the sea and life in the sea and shipping and probably great tidal waves. Thirdly, you have a great star falling from heaven. Now, there are two interpretations for this star. The star could be a star. It could be what we commonly call a falling star, a meteorite. It could be an angel, because oftentimes in Scripture, angels are called stars. They're called morning stars in one case. Angels are often referred to in the Old Testament as stars. That is a pinpoint of light in the sky. And so when the third angel sounds and there falls a great star from heaven, burning as it were like a lamp, fell upon a third part of the rivers and the fountains of the waters, it could be an angel delivering some type of curse to the waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. Now, the second interpretation of the star is that it is some kind of a comet, perhaps. And this takes me back to a number of different comets that have grazed the earth over the last 100 years. And it's a fact that comets are poisonous for the most part. They contain, in many cases, arsenic. They contain rare earth metals, which can oxidize quickly and form poisons. Comets are known to be very, very toxic, chemically toxic. This could be a comet. Third angel sounds, and now we have introduced toxicity, extraterrestrial toxicity. And the name of this star is called Wormwood. And in the Greek, by the way, that is absinthe. Absinthe, which we pronounce as absinthe in English. Absinthe is a poisonous plant that, if picked and brewed in water, produces a deadly poison, absinthe. It's also a psychedelic, known to be psychedelic, and if used in small quantities, produces hallucinations. The name of this star is absinthe. And by the way, this same substance is mentioned in the Old Testament many, many times. Lamentations 3:15, he hath filled me with bitterness, he hath made me drunken with wormwood. And in the Hebrew for absinthe is la'ana. It's the same plant. It's a poisonous plant, a hallucinogen. Lamentations 3:19, remembering my affliction, misery, the wormwood, and the gall. So wormwood is associated with judgment, and it is a deadly poison, and it also has, and check it out, wormwood or absinthe has the additional side effect that it causes hallucinations. Just throw that into the mix if you're not already worried enough. That would be a bad deal. The name of this star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood. What would happen if you drank some of that stuff? You'd be out of your mind until you died. Not a pretty picture. Many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. The fourth trumpet sounds, and the third part of the sun was smitten, third part of the moon, third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened. Now, we've already seen one blackout back in Revelation 6. Who knows what caused it? As I said, it could be atmospheric vapors, volcanism. It's hard to say. But something is interfering with the light of the sun, moon, and stars, and here is a partial interference. A third part of the sun, third part of the moon, third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened. The day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. I beheld, I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. So we've had 4 trumpets sounding, and we have an angel flying through the air pronouncing woe. Well, if you've ever read the Old Testament and read the woes, every time you come to the word woe in the Old Testament, it's a real woe. Something horrific is about to happen. And here, this eagle, could be an angel, could be a seraph that looks like an eagle. I don't know. Could be an eagle. But it's a talking eagle, whatever it is, and it says woe, because eagles don't ordinarily say woe. We have here the warning about that which is to come. The 3 final trumpet judgments are especially severe for mankind on earth because they are much more far-reaching and much more catastrophic in their effects than the first 4 trumpets. And they have a supernatural component thrown in. You notice the first 4 trumpets have been natural, or have affected the natural world in some way. The next trumpets have not only natural disasters, but supernatural disasters. And when you mix the supernatural with a natural disaster, you got real problems. Next week, we're going to take a systematic look at all of these 7 trumpets and see how they take us all the way back to the Exodus. God's doing the same thing in the Exodus that he will do in Revelation chapters 8 and 9. It's phenomenal how he clues his people in to what's happening. The rest of the world, they don't have a clue. I think the stage is being set for this right now. Even the most conservative Bible scholars I am hearing speak in terms of the stage being set. And I'm talking about people who don't ordinarily get into heavy-duty prophetic interpretation. They just kind of stay clear of it. And yet I'm hearing a lot of pastors teaching that the stage is in fact being set for all this. And by the way, natural disasters signify a change from the regularity of natural law. Natural law throughout the whole church age has just controlled the world like a clock. Everything's gone just swimmingly. Natural law has been in effect, and you can depend on it day in and day out. A day is coming when natural law is going to be suspended. And some people are saying, are we seeing that right now? I don't know whether we are or not. I'm not ready to say that we are, but we're close.